The package arrived on a cold Thursday morning. I was halfway through my coffee when the doorbell buzzed, shattering the quiet of the kitchen. Normally, I'd ignore it, probably just the neighbor's delivery again. But something about the persistent buzzing pushed me to answer. A man in a black hoodie stood on my porch, shoving a slim, unmarked envelope into my hands before disappearing without a word. No logo, no return address, no explanation. Just my name scrawled on the front in blocky, almost angry letters. Who was it? Jessica's voice floated down the hall. She wasn't supposed to be home. Her Friday mornings were usually booked solid at her yoga class. Wrong house, I said, stuffing the envelope into my pocket before she appeared in the doorway. Her hair was damp, her cheeks flushed, like she'd rushed through a shower. She shot me a quick smile before heading into the kitchen, and I watched her every move. For some reason, my heart was hammering in my chest. I waited until she was out of sight before retreating to my office. Shutting the door behind me, I opened the envelope with a shaky hand. Inside were 3 photographs. The first one showed Jessica at her office, laughing with a man I didn't recognize. They stood close, too close. Her hand was on his arm, his head tilted in that way people do when they're sharing a secret. The second photo was darker, grainier. It looked like it had been taken at night, outside of a restaurant. Jessica and the same man stood by a car, her hand on his chest now. The way she smiled at him in the picture made my stomach churn. But it was the third photo that made the room tilt. A hotel. Jessica. The man. Her hand intertwined with his as they disappeared through the door marked room 204. I stared at the photos for what felt like hours, my brain unable to process what I was seeing. 100 thoughts collided at once. Was this real? Who sent these? Was I losing my mind? The sound of footsteps snapped me out of my daze. Jessica was coming upstairs. Without thinking, I shoved the photos back into the envelope and slipped it under a stack of papers on my desk. "Hey," she said, leaning on the doorframe. "I'm heading out to meet Kelly. Dinner plans. Don't wait up, okay?" She was lying. I knew it now in a way I couldn't unknow. Her voice was too casual, her smile too perfect. "Sure," I said, my own voice distant. As soon as she left, I grabbed the envelope again and stared at the photos. My mind raced with possibilities, each darker than the last. Something told me this was just the beginning. I decided then and there that I wasn't going to sit back and let this unfold without answers. Whoever sent me these photos wanted me to act, and I wasn't going to disappoint them. The hunt was on. I couldn't sleep that night. The photos sat on the desk like a live wire, taunting me with their silence. I flipped through them over and over, searching for something I might have missed. A clue, a reflection, anything that could tell me more. At 2 a.m., I did the only thing that made sense. I called my friend Mike. Mike wasn't just a friend, he was a private investigator. We'd met years ago when he helped a coworker track down her ex-husband, who had vanished with her savings. He was sharp, relentless, and discreet. Exactly what I needed right now. "Do you have any idea what time it is?" he grumbled when he answered. "I wouldn't call if it wasn't serious," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "Mike, I think Jessica's cheating on me." There was a pause, long enough to make me wonder if he'd fallen back asleep. Then his tone changed. Professional. All business. "Tell me everything." I spilled it all. The strange package, the photos, the growing distance between us over the last few months. By the time I finished, I felt like I'd run a marathon. "All right," Mike said. "First step, don't confront her yet. If she's lying, she'll cover her tracks better. You want proof? You wait. What do I do in the meantime? You give me the man's face, the hotel name, anything else you've got. I'll take it from here." The next day, while Jessica was working late, I slipped out to meet Mike at a diner on the edge of town. He was already there, a worn leather notebook open in front of him. I handed him the photos and he studied them carefully. "Looks like a corporate thing," he muttered, pointing to the man's tie, which bore a company logo. "Any chance she knows this guy from work?" "I don't know," I admitted. "She talks about her coworkers sometimes, but not in detail." Mike made a note. "I'll run his face through a few tools, see if I can get a name. You said you found these on your porch." "Yeah. That's the part that bugs me," Mike said, leaning back in his chair. Someone wanted you to see these. Someone's playing a game here, and it's not just your wife. That thought hadn't occurred to me. I'd been so consumed by the betrayal that I hadn't considered the messenger's motives. Whoever it is, Mike continued, they've got resources. They're watching her or you. Probably both. That sent a chill down my spine. Who the hell was I dealing with? When I got home, Jessica was already asleep. Her purse sat on the counter open. It felt wrong to invade her privacy, but Mike's words echoed in my head. You want proof? You wait. Inside the purse, I found her phone. Locked, of course. But there was also a small folded piece of paper with a number scribbled on it. No name, just the digits. I wrote it down, careful to put everything back exactly as I'd found it. The next morning, while Jessica showered, I called the number from my work phone. It rang 3 times before a man answered. Yeah. His voice was groggy, like I'd woken him. I didn't speak. My throat tightened, and for a moment, I couldn't even breathe. Hello? He said again, this time sharper. I hung up. Jessica walked into the kitchen 10 minutes later, smiling like nothing had happened. I watched her pour coffee, my mind racing. She didn't know yet, but the walls were closing in. Saturday night. I couldn't sit still. Mike had texted me earlier in the day with an update. He had identified the man from the photos. His name was Ryan Peterson, a mid-level manager at Jessica's company. Married, 2 kids, lived 2 towns over. On paper, he looked like the last guy you'd expect to blow up his life for an affair. But people surprise you. Then Mike hit me with the real bombshell. He's booked at the Holloway Grand tonight. Checked in under his name. Room 204. It was the same hotel from the photo, the same room. My hands started shaking just reading the message. I knew what this meant. Jessica wasn't home yet. She'd left earlier in the afternoon, saying she had errands to run, and now I was certain I knew exactly where she'd gone. Mike had advised me to keep my distance, to let him handle it, but I couldn't. Not this time. I needed to see it for myself. I drove to the Holloway Grand just as the sun was setting, parking across the street where I had a clear view of the front entrance. For a solid hour, nothing happened. People came and went, but none of them were Jessica. My mind started to spiral. Was I wrong? Was this just some cruel prank? Then I saw her. Jessica walked through the front doors in a dark red dress I'd never seen before, the kind that screamed not for your husband's eyes. She was on her phone, laughing, her hair swept over one shoulder. She looked stunning, and it made me sick. A minute later, Ryan appeared. He wasn't in the photos from the package, but Mike's research had etched his face into my brain. He was tall, sharp-jawed, and annoyingly confident as he greeted her with a hand on her lower back. They didn't linger in the lobby. No drinks, no pretense. Just a quick check-in at the desk before heading straight for the elevators. My hands clenched the steering wheel so tightly I thought it might snap. Every nerve in my body screamed at me to charge in, to confront them right then and there, but I forced myself to wait. I needed proof, real proof. Once they were out of sight, I slipped out of my car and crossed the street, adrenaline numbing the cold air against my skin. Inside the lobby, I kept my head down, trying to look like just another guest. The concierge barely glanced at me as I passed. The elevator ride up to the second floor felt endless. By the time the doors opened, my heart was pounding so hard I thought it might give me away. Room 204 was at the far end of the hallway. I walked past it the first time, pretending to check my phone, then doubled back, stopping just close enough to hear muffled voices. Jessica's laugh pierced through the door, light and teasing. Ryan said something in response, his voice lower, but I couldn't make out the words. I stayed there for a moment, frozen. Part of me wanted to knock, to make them face me right then and there, but another part, the rational part, knew I couldn't yet. Instead, I pulled out my phone and dialed Mike. "I'm here," I whispered. "Did you see them? They're in the room. Together." There was a pause. "Don't do anything stupid," Mike said. "I'll handle this. Go home." I didn't respond. I hung up and stood there for a few more seconds, trying to figure out what the hell to do next. Then the door opened. Jessica stepped out first, her hair slightly disheveled, her lipstick smudged at the corners. She didn't see me. She was too busy adjusting her dress, smoothing it over her hips as Ryan followed her out. They laughed quietly, like 2 kids sneaking out past curfew. before disappearing down the hallway toward the elevator. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. My stomach twisted into knots, rage and heartbreak warring for control. Proof. I had all the proof I needed now. As I turned to leave, one thought echoed in my mind. The confrontation was coming, and it was going to be explosive. The ride home was a blur. My knuckles were white against the steering wheel, my mind replaying the scene outside room 204 over and over like a twisted film reel. Jessica, laughing. Jessica, fixing her dress. Jessica, walking away with him like it was the most natural thing in the world. By the time I got home, I was no longer shaking. I was calm, too calm. The kind of calm that comes just before a storm. Jessica's car wasn't in the driveway. Of course it wasn't. She wouldn't be back for hours, maybe not until morning. But that worked in my favor. I needed time to think, to plan. This wasn't going to be some screaming match. No, I wanted her to feel every ounce of what I was feeling. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I set the stage. When Jessica finally walked through the door at 10 a.m. the next morning, wearing the same red dress from the night before, she didn't look surprised to see me sitting at the dining table. She barely even acknowledged me. "Morning," she said, heading straight for the kitchen. I stayed silent, watching her pour herself a cup of coffee. She didn't even bother to explain where she'd been. "Late night?" I finally asked, my voice steady. She froze for half a second before turning to face me, her smile carefully measured. "Yeah, Kelly and I ended up staying out later than we planned. You know how she gets after a couple of drinks." I nodded, letting her lie settle into the air between us. "That's funny. I thought Kelly was in Chicago this weekend for her niece's birthday." Jessica blinked, her smile faltering. It was subtle, but I caught it. "Oh, right. She was. I meant Becca. Sorry. I'm so tired I can't think straight." "Of course," I said, leaning back in my chair. "You must be exhausted after your night at the Holloway Grand." Her face drained of color so fast it was almost comical. "What are you talking about?" I stood, pulling the envelope out of my back pocket and tossing it onto the table. The photos spilled out, spreading across the surface like evidence at a trial. "Room 204, I said, my voice sharp now. "Jessica, don't you dare insult me by pretending you don't know what I'm talking about." She stared at the photos, her hands trembling as she picked one up. For a split second, I saw real panic in her eyes. Then, as if flipping a switch, she laughed. "Oh my God, this?" she said, holding up the picture of her with Ryan outside the hotel. "This is nothing. Ryan and I went there to go over some reports in private. It's just work stuff." "Work stuff?" I repeated, my voice icy. "So work stuff now involves walking out of a hotel room at midnight, laughing like a teenager sneaking out of prom?" Her face hardened. "You're being ridiculous. Do you even hear yourself? You sound paranoid." I slammed my hand on the table, making her jump. Don't turn this on me. I saw you, Jessica. I was there." Her mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. Finally, she managed to say, "I don't know what you think you saw, but it's not what it looks like." I barked out a bitter laugh. "Oh, really? Then why don't you explain it to me? Or better yet, why don't I call Ryan's wife and see what she thinks about your little work meeting?" That hit the mark. Her mask cracked, and for the first time she looked genuinely scared. "You wouldn't," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Try me," I said, pulling out my phone and scrolling to the number Mike had given me. Jessica's composure shattered. "All right, fine. Is that what you want?" "Yes, I kissed him. Once. It was stupid and meaningless. Okay? Just a friendly kiss at the corporate party. That's all it was." I stared at her, stunned by the sheer audacity of the lie. "A friendly kiss?" I repeated. "You're telling me it was just a friendly kiss, but my detective already has photos of you walking into a hotel room with him?" Her face turned beet red, and for a moment, she was speechless. Then the anger came. "A detective? Are you serious? What kind of husband spies on his own wife? Do you have any idea how insane you sound?" "Insane," I said, my voice rising. "Insane is lying to my face for months and thinking I wouldn't figure it out. Insane is risking our marriage for some sleazy affair with a coworker." Her eyes narrowed, and her tone turned venomous. "You know what? Maybe if you weren't so controlling, I wouldn't have needed someone like Ryan to talk to. That hit me like a slap to the face. The sheer gall of her trying to blame me for her actions left me speechless. "You're unbelievable," I finally said, my voice low. "I gave you everything, Jessica. Everything. And this is how you repay me." She crossed her arms, defiance written all over her face. "Well, maybe I'm not the only one who's been unhappy, huh? Did you ever think about that?" For a moment, all I could do was stare at her. The woman I thought I knew better than anyone. Now a stranger standing in my kitchen. "Pack your things," I said finally, my voice deadly calm. "You're leaving." Her jaw dropped. "You can't be serious." "Dead serious," I said, turning away from her. "Get out. We're done." The sound of her footsteps retreating up the stairs was the only answer I needed. Jessica's footsteps stomped upstairs, each one louder than the last. She was furious, and I could hear drawers slamming shut as she began throwing her things into a suitcase. I stayed downstairs, gripping the edge of the dining table so tightly that my knuckles turned white. I needed to stay calm to keep control, but control felt impossible when your life was unraveling in real time. After 10 minutes of listening to her rant and stomp around, she appeared at the top of the stairs, dragging her suitcase behind her. Her face was a mix of anger and disbelief, like she couldn't process that I wasn't caving to her excuses. "So, this is how it's gonna be?" she said, her voice dripping with venom. "You're throwing me out of my house because you can't handle the truth?" I stood and faced her, keeping my voice steady. "You're damn right I'm throwing you out. You don't get to disrespect me, lie to my face, and then act like the victim." Her eyes narrowed, and she took a step closer, pointing a manicured finger at me. "You think you're so perfect, huh? Do you even know how exhausting it is being married to you? Always so uptight, always needing to be in control. Maybe if you weren't so." "Don't." I cut her off, my voice sharp enough to make her flinch. "Don't try to turn this around on me. You're the one who cheated, Jessica. You're the one who lied. You don't get to rewrite the story just because it's convenient." She let out a bitter laugh, shaking her head. "Fine. You want the truth? Yes, I've been seeing Ryan. And guess what? He actually listens to me. He doesn't treat me like I'm some accessory to his perfect little life." Her words cut deep, but I refused to let her see how much they hurt. "You're unbelievable," I said. "Do you even hear yourself? You destroyed our marriage, and your excuse is that I didn't listen enough? That's pathetic, Jessica." She shrugged, as if none of this mattered to her anymore. "Maybe it is, but at least I'm not the one who hired a private detective like some paranoid psycho. You want to talk about pathetic? Look in the mirror." I clenched my fists, fighting the urge to scream. "Get out," I said, my voice shaking with rage. "Now." For a moment, it looked like she might say something else, but then she grabbed her suitcase and stormed toward the door. As she reached it, she turned back, her eyes blazing. "You're going to regret this," she said, her voice cold. "You think you're the victim, but you're not. You're just a control freak who couldn't see what was right in front of him." I didn't respond. I just stood there, watching as she walked out the door and slammed it shut behind her. The sound echoed through the house, leaving behind an eerie silence. For a few minutes, I didn't move. I just stood there, staring at the door, trying to process what had just happened. My mind was a whirlwind of emotions. Anger, sadness, betrayal. But underneath it all, there was a strange sense of relief. She was gone. I walked back to the dining table and picked up the photos again, studying them with fresh eyes. The woman in those pictures wasn't the Jessica I thought I knew. She was a stranger, someone who had been living a double life right under my nose. My phone buzzed on the table, breaking the silence. It was a text from Mike. "Got more on Ryan. Call me when you're ready." I stared at the screen, a new wave of anger rising in my chest. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. Jessica might have walked out, but the fallout was just beginning. After Jessica left, the house felt unnaturally quiet. Her absence hung in the air, but it wasn't a peaceful silence. It was the kind that crawls under your skin, leaving you with the eerie sense that something is still watching. I wasn't sure if it was my imagination or the weight of everything I just learned. Mike's text about Ryan had me pacing the living room, my phone clenched tightly in my hand. I debated whether to call him right away or give myself time to think. But curiosity and anger won out. "Tell me what you found," I said as soon as he answered. Mike didn't waste time. "Ryan's got a history, a messy one. He's been involved in this kind of thing before, affairs with coworkers, the whole 9 yards. 3 years ago, his wife filed for divorce after catching him with another woman, but they reconciled. Why would she stay with him?" I muttered, half to myself. "Money," Mike replied flatly. "He's got plenty of it. She didn't want to lose her lifestyle, so she took him back on the condition that he clean up his act. Looks like he didn't." The pieces started clicking together in my mind. Ryan wasn't just some random fling for Jessica. He was a pro at this. Someone who knew exactly how to manipulate people to get what he wanted. "Anything else?" I asked, my voice tight. "Yeah," Mike said, hesitating. "This part might be harder to hear. The photos you got, they weren't just taken by chance. Someone hired a private investigator to follow Jessica. But it wasn't you." My stomach dropped. "What do you mean it wasn't me?" "I mean Ryan's wife hired someone. She's been on to him for months, and she's the one who sent you the photos. Looks like she found your name and address through some shared connection, maybe a company event or social media. She wanted you to know, probably to cause trouble for Ryan and Jessica." I sat down hard on the couch, my mind spinning. This whole thing wasn't just about me and Jessica. It was a chess game and I was a pawn. "So what now?" I asked. "That depends," Mike said. "You want to let this go and move on? Or do you want to fight back?" The answer was immediate. "I want to fight back." Mike gave a short laugh. I figured, "All right, I've got a few ideas. First, you need to talk to Ryan's wife. She's on your side in this, whether she realizes it or not. I'll send you her contact info. Second, you need to lock down your finances. Affairs like this have a way of turning messy fast." After hanging up, I stared at the number Mike sent me for what felt like hours. I wasn't sure what I'd say to Ryan's wife, or if she'd even want to talk to me, but the need for answers outweighed my hesitation. When I finally called, a soft voice answered. "Hello." "Hi," I said, my throat dry. "This is complicated, but my name is David, and I think we have something in common. Your husband, Ryan, and my wife, Jessica." There was a long pause on the other end. Then she let out a quiet, bitter laugh. "I was wondering when you'd call. We met at a coffee shop that afternoon. Her name was Laura, and she was every bit as poised and polished as you'd expect from someone married to a guy like Ryan. But beneath the calm exterior, there was a sharpness in her eyes, a quiet fury that matched my own. "I'm sorry you had to find out this way," Laura said, stirring her coffee. "I didn't know what else to do. Ryan's lied to me so many times, and when I found out about Jessica, I needed someone else to see what he was doing. Someone who wouldn't just brush it off." "Why didn't you confront him yourself?" I asked. She looked down, her fingers tightening around the mug. "I did, and he promised me, like always, that it was nothing, that it was a misunderstanding. But I knew better this time." I nodded, understanding all too well what it felt like to be lied to by someone you trusted. "Do you know how long it's been going on?" I asked. Laura hesitated, then slid a folder across the table. Inside were more photos, time-stamped and labeled. They went back 6 months. 6 months, I whispered, my voice hollow. She nodded. "Maybe longer." I stopped digging after that. I couldn't take it anymore. For the first time, I saw tears glisten in her eyes, but she blinked them away quickly. "What are you going to do now?" I asked. Laura's jaw tightened. "I'm done. I've already filed for divorce. Ryan doesn't know yet, but he will soon." "What about you?" I thought about Jessica, about her lies, her betrayal, and her defiance. The anger simmered just beneath my skin, but for the first time, there was also clarity. "I'm done too," I said. Laura smiled faintly, a look of shared understanding passing between us. By the time I left the coffee shop, the path forward was clear. Jessica might have thought she could walk away unscathed, but she was wrong. The fallout wasn't over, it was just beginning. Jessica had no idea what was coming. While she was busy licking her wounds and probably spinning her version of the story to anyone who would listen, I was setting the stage for something she wouldn't see coming. I spent the next few days coordinating with Mike and Laura. If Jessica and Ryan wanted to play games, they were about to learn that they'd underestimated me. The first move came from Laura. She'd been methodical, collecting evidence over the months and quietly laying the groundwork for her divorce. But now, with me in the picture, she had more ammunition than ever. She drafted a letter to Ryan's company HR department, outlining his workplace affair in excruciating detail. The photos were attached. So was a timeline of his indiscretions, which included not just Jessica but 2 other women from previous years. Corporate policy doesn't take kindly to this kind of thing, Laura said when she emailed me a copy of the draft. It was true. I'd done my research and Ryan's company had a strict code of conduct. This kind of behavior could cost him his job and his reputation. While Laura prepared to launch her attack, I focused on Jessica. I hadn't spoken to her since I threw her out, but I knew she wasn't taking things seriously. Mutual friends started reaching out, saying she'd been spreading rumors about me, calling me controlling, paranoid, even abusive. I didn't bother defending myself. The truth would come out soon enough. Mike had been busy digging deeper into Jessica's activities. He found credit card charges for hotel rooms, dinners at expensive restaurants, and even a spa weekend she told me was a work retreat. It was all there in black and white, a paper trail of her lies. But the real bombshell came when Mike found out where she was staying now. She's with Ryan, he told me during a late-night call. He's got a rental property downtown, and she moved in 2 days ago. I clenched the phone so tightly I thought it might break. She's living with him? Looks like it, Mike said. And here's the kicker. Ryan doesn't know Laura's about to file for divorce. He thinks he's in the clear. That was all I needed to hear. The next morning, I scheduled a meeting with my divorce attorney. I brought every piece of evidence Mike had gathered, along with Laura's photos and notes. My attorney, a no-nonsense woman named Ellen, wasted no time. "This is ironclad," she said, flipping through the documents. "She'll have no grounds to contest this. Do you want to push for infidelity as the primary cause?" "Yes," I said without hesitation. Ellen nodded. "We'll hit her with the papers first thing Monday morning. She won't know what hit her." But I wasn't done yet. I wanted Jessica to feel the weight of her choices, not just in court but in every aspect of her life. With Laura's help, I sent an anonymous tip to her employer about the affair. Jessica had been using company resources, her work phone, expense accounts, to cover her tracks. It was a violation of their policies, and Laura assured me they'd take it seriously. "I hope they fire her," Laura said, her voice cold. "She deserves it." By the time Monday rolled around, the trap was set. Ellen filed the divorce papers first thing in the morning, delivering them to Jessica at her new address, Ryan's rental. I would have paid to see the look on her face when she opened that envelope. An hour later, Laura's letter hit Ryan's HR department. Within minutes, she received a call from his boss, thanking her for bringing the matter to their attention. Jessica called me that afternoon, her number flashing on my phone like a warning signal. I let it ring. Then she called again, and again. By the 5th call, I picked up. "What do you want, Jessica?" I asked, my tone devoid of emotion. "What the hell is wrong with you?" she screamed. "Do you think you can just destroy my life because you're bitter?" I laughed, the sound cold and sharp. "Destroy your life? Jessica, you did that all on your own. I'm just making sure everyone knows the truth." She sputtered, clearly caught off guard. You had no right to involve my job. Or Ryan's." "Funny," I said. "I could say the same about you involving another man in our marriage." There was a long silence, broken only by her ragged breathing. Finally, she said, "You're going to regret this." "No, Jessica," I said calmly. "The only one regretting anything here is you. Goodbye." I hung up, feeling an unfamiliar sense of closure. For the first time in weeks, I didn't feel like I was drowning. I'd taken control and there was no turning back. As I sat back, staring at the now quiet phone, I realized something important. Jessica and Ryan thought they could manipulate the people around them without consequences. But they were wrong. This was just the beginning of their reckoning. By the time Tuesday rolled around, everything was in motion, and the fallout was hitting faster than I could have imagined. I woke up to a series of messages from Mike, each one more satisfying than the last. "Mike, Ryan was called into an HR meeting this morning. Sources say he didn't leave happy. Mike, Jessica's company is investigating her expense accounts. She's under review. Mike. Laura filed her divorce paperwork. Ryan's about to have a real bad day. The satisfaction I felt was cold and sharp, like a blade that had finally found its mark. But there was more to do. Around noon, Laura called. Her voice was calm but tinged with quiet glee. Ryan knows, she said. He came home ranting about how his vindictive wife ruined his career. I didn't even have to say a word. He's packing his things now. What about Jessica? I asked, leaning back in my chair. Laura let out a dry laugh. She showed up here about an hour ago. I guess Ryan hadn't told her everything yet. She looked completely blindsided when I handed her a copy of the divorce papers. I could almost picture it. Jessica, standing in Laura's pristine living room, her carefully crafted world crumbling around her. What did she say? She tried to play innocent, of course. Said she had no idea Ryan was married, that he told her they were separated. I just smiled and told her she was welcome to him now. Let them ruin each other. Her words hung in the air, a testament to how far both of us had come in the last week. Later that afternoon, my own phone buzzed with a new message from Ellen, my divorce attorney. Ellen, Jessica's been served. Her attorney called to say she wants to talk. Talk? Now she wanted to talk? I ignored the message for hours, focusing on work and anything else to keep my mind busy. But by evening, curiosity got the better of me. Called her. David? Jessica said as soon as she picked up, her voice softer than I'd heard in weeks. Can we meet, please? I want to explain. I almost laughed. Explain? After all this? But something in me needed to hear her try. Maybe it was morbid curiosity, or maybe I just wanted to see how far she'd go to twist the truth. Fine, I said. Tomorrow. Coffee shop by my office. Noon. The next day, she was already there when I arrived, sitting in a corner booth with her hands wrapped around a coffee cup. She looked different, not confident or defiant like before, but small, almost timid. David, she said as I slid into the seat across from her. Thank you for coming. I didn't respond. I just waited, letting the silence stretch between us until she squirmed. I know you're angry, she began, her voice trembling slightly. And you have every right to be. I made mistakes. I know that. But this has all gotten so out of control. The private investigator, the HR reports, the divorce papers. Why are you doing this to me? To you, I repeated, leaning forward. Jessica, you lied to me. You cheated on me. And when I confronted you, you blamed me. Do you even hear yourself right now? Her eyes filled with tears. And for a moment, I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. I never meant for it to go this far, she said, her voice breaking. It started out innocent, just talking, you know? And then things got complicated. I didn't know how to stop. Complicated, I said, my voice dripping with disbelief. Jessica, you didn't complicate anything. You made choices. You lied, you betrayed me, and now you're dealing with the consequences. That's not my fault. She reached across the table, her hand trembling. Please, David. Don't let this end like this. We can fix this. We can go to counseling, work through it. I still love you. Her words hit me like a slap, but not in the way she intended. They didn't stir hope or nostalgia. They felt hollow, like a desperate attempt to regain control. No, Jessica, I said, pulling my hand away. You don't love me. You love the idea of me, of what I provided for you. Stability, security. But you threw all of that away for some fling. And now, you want me to fix it for you. She flinched, her tears falling freely now. I made a mistake. I know I did. But can't we just move on? Start over. I stared at her, searching for any trace of the woman I'd fallen in love with. But all I saw was someone who had destroyed everything we'd built together and refused to take responsibility for it. No, I said finally, my voice firm. We're done, Jessica. I've already filed for divorce, and nothing you say is going to change that. Her face crumpled, and for a brief moment, I thought she might argue. But instead, she nodded, wiping her tears with a shaky hand. I hope you find what you're looking for, she said quietly, her voice barely audible. I already have, I said, standing up. As I walked out of the coffee shop, A strange sense of peace washed over me. For the first time in weeks, I felt like I was truly free. Jessica's plea at the coffee shop didn't haunt me the way I thought it might. Instead, it solidified something deep inside me, an unshakable resolve to see this through. For years, I had been the one holding our life together, while she chipped away at its foundation. Now it was time to take back what was mine. That evening, as I sat in the quiet of my home, Mike called. His voice carried a note of triumph I hadn't heard before. "You're going to want to hear this," he said. "Lay it on me," I replied, sipping my drink. "Ryan's life is imploding faster than I expected. HR didn't just reprimand him, they fired him on the spot. Apparently, the affair violated a non-fraternization policy, and Laura's evidence sealed the deal. Words already spread through the company. I couldn't help the smirk that crept onto my face. Good. He deserves it. Oh, it gets better," Mike continued. "Remember that rental property he was using to play house with Jessica? Turns out it wasn't in his name. It belongs to one of his business partners who wasn't thrilled to find out it was being used for extracurricular activities. Ryan's getting evicted." I leaned back, letting the satisfaction settle in. Ryan's downfall was poetic. Everything he had tried to keep hidden was unraveling, and Jessica was right there in the middle of it. "What about Jessica?" I asked. "She's not far behind," Mike said. "Her company's audit turned up some questionable charges. Nothing criminal, but enough to raise red flags. She's been suspended while they investigate further." The pieces were falling into place. I didn't need to lift another finger. Their own actions were doing all the work for me. But I wasn't quite finished. The next morning, I contacted Ellen to discuss the division of assets. "I want to make this as clean as possible," I told her. "She doesn't deserve a dime more than what she's legally entitled to." Ellen, ever the professional, assured me she'd handle it. But as we went over the details, she paused. "Have you considered what you'll do if Jessica fights this?" she asked. "If she pushes for more?" I thought about it for a moment before replying. "Then we'll fight back. She has no leg to stand on, and she knows it." By the end of the week, Jessica's attorney had reached out with a proposal, one that was laughably ambitious. She wanted spousal support, claiming she'd sacrificed her career growth to support our marriage. Ellen called me as soon as she received the letter. "You're not seriously considering this, are you?" she asked. "Absolutely not," I said. "Push back. She doesn't get to betray me and then act like a victim." The days stretched into weeks as the legal battle began to take shape. Jessica's once flawless image was crumbling under the weight of her choices. Our mutual friends started reaching out, not to take her side, but to apologize for ever believing her lies about me. I had no idea what she was really like. One of them said over the phone, "She always seemed so put together, but now, it all makes sense." It wasn't just my friends who saw her differently. Jessica's family, who had once adored me, began reaching out too. Her sister called one evening, her voice heavy with regret. "I'm so sorry for everything," she said. "We didn't know what was really going on. Jessica made it sound like you were the problem." "I appreciate the apology," I replied. "But this isn't about taking sides. It's about moving forward." And I meant it. I wasn't looking for revenge anymore. The satisfaction of watching Jessica and Ryan's lives fall apart wasn't as sweet as I thought it would be. What I truly wanted was peace. A chance to rebuild my life without the weight of their betrayal hanging over me. By the end of the month, the divorce papers were finalized. Jessica didn't fight back as hard as I thought she would, likely because she didn't have the resources to drag it out. When the final documents arrived, I felt an overwhelming sense of relief. It was over. As I packed away the last remnants of our shared life, photos, mementos, the little things that had once meant so much, I felt a strange mix of emotions. Sadness for what we'd lost, anger for what she'd done, but also hope. For the first time in years, the future felt wide open. The reckoning was complete, and now it was time to rebuild. The day the divorce was finalized, I stood in my now quiet house and let the weight of it all settle over me. Papers signed, assets divided, and Jessica officially out of my life. It should have felt like the end, but instead, it felt like the beginning of something entirely new. The first thing I did was pack a bag and head to the mountains. I didn't tell anyone where I was going. Not Mike. Not Laura. not even my family. I needed space to breathe, to reflect, to let go. For 3 days, I hiked trails I'd never walked before, surrounded by nothing but towering trees and the crisp, clean air. With every step, I felt lighter, like I was shedding layers of the pain and anger that had been weighing me down. On the third night, sitting by a crackling fire under a sky full of stars, I thought about the man I'd been before all of this. The version of myself that Jessica had met and fallen in love with. He was hopeful, open, and full of plans for the future. Somewhere along the way, I'd lost that version of myself. But out there, in the stillness of the wilderness, I realized something important. I could find him again. When I returned home, I started making changes. First, I redecorated the house. Every trace of Jessica, the photos, the furniture she'd chosen, the little decorative pieces that had once made the house ours, was packed away and replaced with things that felt like me. The transformation wasn't just physical. It was symbolic. This was my space now, and I was reclaiming it. Next, I threw myself into my work. I'd always loved what I did, but during my marriage, I'd let my career take a back seat to Jessica's needs and ambitions. Now, I poured my energy into new projects, earning a promotion within months. It wasn't just about the money or the recognition. It was about proving to myself that I could thrive on my own. But the most important change came when I started reconnecting with people. For years, my world had revolved around Jessica, and I hadn't realized how much I'd neglected my friendships. Slowly, I began reaching out, grabbing beers with Mike, catching up with old college buddies, even joining a local hiking group. It was through that hiking group that I met someone. Her name was Emily. She wasn't like Jessica. There was no flashy charm, no polished perfection. Emily was warm, grounded, and genuine in a way that caught me off guard. She loved the outdoors, worked as a graphic designer, and had a laugh that felt like sunlight breaking through clouds. We started off as friends, trading stories about our favorite trails and swapping music recommendations. But as the weeks turned into months, something deeper began to grow between us. One evening, after a long hike that left both of us breathless and laughing, she turned to me with a smile. "You seem different lately," she said. "Different how?" I asked, genuinely curious. "Lighter," she said simply. "Like you've let go of something heavy." Her words hit me harder than I expected. She was right. For the first time in years, I wasn't carrying the weight of someone else's expectations, lies, or betrayal. I was just me. Our friendship eventually turned into something more. It wasn't rushed or forced. It unfolded naturally, like it was meant to be. Emily didn't just fill the empty spaces in my life. She helped me see that those spaces weren't empty at all. They were opportunities to grow, to build something new. Looking back, I can't say I'm grateful for what Jessica did. Her betrayal was a wound that left scars, and those scars will always be a part of me. But I can say that I'm grateful for what came after, for the strength I found, the lessons I learned, and the life I've built since. If there's one piece of advice I'd give to anyone going through something similar, it's this. Don't let betrayal define you. It's not the end of your story. It's just one chapter, and you get to decide what comes next. For me, the next chapter is about love. Not just with Emily, but with myself. And for the first time in a long time, I can honestly say I'm happy.